They came from the dark beyond the stars, silent, patient, and merciless. To the hunters who drifted between galaxies, humanity was nothing more than a curiosity, an uncharted species clinging to a fragile blue world. The alien kind, known among themselves as the Korath, had spent eons perfecting the art of predation. They had watched suns burn out and civilizations crumble, yet they endured, thriving on the essence of the hunt. To them, life existed to be measured, tested, and ultimately consumed. And so, when their long-range eyes detected Earth's faint transmissions, songs, speeches and laughter echoing across the void, they felt something stir. Here was no empire, no fortress world, no rival, only prey. From their observation crafts, they studied our oceans and cities with cold fascination. They watched children play in fields, watched ships crossing seas, and saw planes carving white trails across the sky. The Korath noted the softness of human flesh, the fragility of bone, the briefness of life. To them it was confirmation. The species of Earth was weak. But there was one detail the Korath could not measure. They saw humans fight among themselves, struggle, stumble, and bleed. They witnessed wars of the past and despair of the present. What they did not see, what no scan could capture, was the fire. That unseen current that burned within even the weakest heart. Far below, humanity lived unaware of the shadows above. On a small coastal city, Captain Elias Rowan stood by the harbor at dawn, watching the sea mist curl around anchored ships. He was a soldier once, hardened by duty but now a quiet man, teaching children how to sail. He felt the peace of the morning, unaware that eyes sharper than any hawk had fixed on him. Elsewhere, in a crowded workshop filled with humming machines, young engineer Lian wiped grease from her fingers. She was restless, a dreamer of iron and fire. Her sketches filled pages. Aircraft with wings shaped like swords, engines that roared like thunder. She dreamed of reaching the stars, not knowing that the stars had already reached for her. And in the city hospital, Dr. Lian moved quietly from patient to patient. She was known for her calm voice, her gentle hands, and the way her eyes never wavered even when hope seemed faint. She carried the weight of many losses, yet pressed on because life demanded it. These three souls, so ordinary, so human, had no knowledge of one another yet. But fate, that strange weaver, was already drawing their threads together. High above the atmosphere, a Korath commander observed with clinical detachment. The prey species displayed emotion, something inefficient, unnecessary. Fear, love, grief, joy. To the Korath, these were weaknesses that made the hunt sweeter. He recorded his judgment in their ancient tongue. Soft-bodied, vulnerable, limited weapons. Minimal resistance expected. It was a verdict of doom. Yet, down on Earth, life went on with stubborn rhythm. Markets bustled. Children laughed. Workers dreamed of tomorrow. Humanity was fragile, yes, but it was not broken. And in the stillness of dawn, something stirred in the winds, as if the world itself knew a storm was gathering beyond its skies. When the first shadow fell, a streak across the heavens brighter than any star, people pointed upward in awe, thinking it a comet. No one knew it was a ship. No one understood it was the first sign of a hunt. The Korath whispered among themselves in their hollow voices. The prey is unaware. The harvest will be swift. But humanity, though unknowing, had been tempered by centuries of hardship, by stories written in sweat and sacrifice. They did not live long lives, but in their short span, they loved fiercely, dreamed deeply, and fought with a passion that defied reason. It would not be swift. And as dawn gave way to day, the hunters sharpened their talons and the prey unknowingly braced their hearts. A meeting of worlds was coming, one of cold calculation against burning spirit, one that would decide who was predator and who would rise from the dust as something far greater. For the Korath had seen prey, but what they would meet was the relentless fury of mankind. The first week passed in silence. The streak that tore across the sky faded from memory for most, written off as a meteor or a trick of atmosphere. Humanity returned to its rhythm, commerce, labor, laughter, and sorrow. But in the quiet places, unease grew. Animals were restless. Satellites blinked out unexpectedly. And some nights, sharp-eyed watchers claimed they saw faint glimmers move against the stars like wolves circling unseen. Captain Elias Rowan, who had once studied battlefields and maps, felt it in his bones. Sitting in his small home above the harbor, he stared out the window at the sky. Something was coming. He could not explain how he knew, but after a lifetime of hearing silence before storms, he recognized the feeling. He had buried his uniform years ago, but the soldier within him stirred. Far inland, Lian worked deep into the night inside her workshop. Her machines hummed like restless spirits as she etched designs across metal sheets. She had a strange habit of listening to static on the radio, as if secrets hid in the noise. Lately, that static carried odd patterns like voices buried beneath waves. She scribbled notes furiously, believing she had caught signals no one else had noticed. "Someone speaking out there," she whispered to herself. Her hands trembled not from fear, but from the thrill of discovery. At the hospital, Dr. Lian saw the first signs that something unnatural had arrived. Several patients came in after claiming to have seen lights hovering silently over the countryside. A farmer swore he lost hours of memory. Another insisted his cattle had vanished without a trace, their pens left open though no lock was broken. Lian listened without judgment. She placed a hand on trembling shoulders and offered calm words. But her heart kept a quiet tally. These were not accidents. And above, the hunters watched. The Korath commander, whose name in their tongue meant voice that cuts bone, observed human settlements with calculated interest. The prey clustered in groups, relying on numbers for safety. Their defenses, metal projectiles, primitive aircraft, surface-to-sky missiles, were laughably inadequate compared to the weapons of the void. Yet there was something troubling in their unpredictability. They adapted quickly. They improvised. He recorded a note of caution, but not hesitation. The first probe descended on a moonless night. Silent as ash, it cut through the atmosphere and hovered above a remote village. Its sensors swept across houses, marking heat signatures, listening to heartbeats. A child stirred in his bed, gazing at the strange light spilling through the window. His mother, waking suddenly, pulled him close. But the probe did not harm them. It only watched, learned, and left. By morning, stories spread. Fear crept in like smoke. Some dismissed it as fantasy. Others whispered of omens. But in three minds, Elias, Mara, and Lian, certainty grew. They did not yet know one another, yet all three felt the same truth pressing against their hearts. This was not of Earth. That evening, the city's power grid flickered. Lights died for 20 long seconds, plunging streets into eerie stillness. When they returned, every screen, televisions, phones, public signs flashed with a brief alien symbol. No one could interpret it, but everyone felt the weight of its meaning. It was not a message of peace. Panic spread. Governments scrambled to deny rumors, issuing statements of technical malfunctions. But people are not blind. Something vast was looming. And in the harbor, Elias finally opened the wooden chest beneath his bed. Within lay his old uniform, neatly folded, and a sidearm he had sworn never to touch again. He placed his hand on the worn fabric and whispered to the empty room, "If it comes to it, I will stand." In her workshop, Mara stayed awake until dawn, decoding the signal from the blackout. The symbol matched a fragment she had caught in the static days earlier. Her heart pounded. She scribbled furiously across the page until the meaning became clear. Survey complete. Prey viable, her knees weakened. She sat heavily, whispering into the silence. "They're watching us." And in the hospital, Dr. Lian comforted a trembling old woman who swore she had seen a dark figure outside her window. Afterward, Lian stood by the window herself, staring out at the city below. And though she saw nothing, she whispered, "Whatever you are, you'll find we're not so easily broken." Above, the Korath fleet shifted closer. Their voices rippled across the void. "Begin the hunt." The night the sky burned, humanity's illusion of safety died. It began with a rumble, low and steady like thunder with no storm. Across cities and farmlands, people tilted their heads upward as streaks of fire tore the heavens. At first it was beautiful, 1,000 meteors flaring across the dark. But beauty turned to dread when the streaks slowed, then stopped, hanging motionless above the world. The Korath fleet had arrived. Ships shaped like black blades shimmered against the clouds, silent and predatory. For a long breath, the world stood still. Then the first beam fell. A rural outpost in the mountains vanished in a pillar of white fire. The ground shook. Windows shattered for miles, and in the silence after came the screams of the living. News stations cut in with frantic reports. Communications jamming, satellites blind, military scrambling. The hunt had begun in earnest. Captain Elias Rowan stood on the docks when the sky lit up. His old instincts snapped awake like steel under tension. He saw the panic rising around him. Families clutching children, fishermen staring at the fiery horizon. And he shouted with the voice of a commander long buried, "Get to shelter! Move!" People obeyed, not because they knew him, but because his voice cut through chaos with certainty. Elias guided them into the stone bunkers left from wars long past, his own heart pounding. He looked once more at the burning horizon and whispered, "So it begins." Mara Lynn was in her workshop when the blackout struck again. Her machines powered down, her radio shrieked with static, and then silence. She rushed outside just in time to see the Korath ships hover like dark gods above the clouds. She felt both awe and terror, her knees weakening beneath her. But instead of fleeing, she ran back inside and began working. Her hands flew over blueprints and scrap. If this was the storm she had always sensed, then she would not hide. She would build. At the hospital, Dr. Lian Hart faced the flood. Injured civilians poured through the doors, burns, broken bones, shock. Sirens wailed outside as ambulances screamed across the city. Lian moved from one bed to another, steady as stone, her calm voice cutting through fear. She had no time to think of the alien sky. Her war was here in blood and tears, in the lives she refused to let slip away. Above Earth, the Korath commander watched the first strike unfold. He noted the panic, the disarray. Predictable, he recorded. Prey seek shelter, flees, cries. Minimal resistance observed. Yet his eyes lingered on one anomaly. The humans did not all scatter. Some gathered the wounded. Some ran toward danger. And some, like the man on the docks, organized others. It was a small detail. But details mattered. Humanity's militaries scrambled jets and launched missiles, but their efforts were like stones thrown at a hurricane. Missiles were burned from the sky before reaching their marks. Fighter jets were swatted down by invisible fields. Yet amid the carnage, stories spread. Pilots who flew straight into impossible fire. Soldiers who held their ground until the last breath. Civilians who shielded strangers with their own bodies. For every life taken, an ember of resistance was lit. By dawn, smoke rose over cities. Communications were fractured. The world trembled under the weight of an enemy it had never imagined. And yet, in that trembling, resolve began to grow. Elias gathered a group of survivors in the bunkers. They looked to him with wide, fearful eyes. He stood before them, scarred by age yet unbroken. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "What's out there is no storm, no disaster. It's an enemy, and enemies can be fought. We are not prey unless we choose to be." His words planted something in their hearts. Courage. Mara soldered sparks through the night, her fingers raw and blistered. She whispered to herself as she worked, "If they can strike us from the sky, then I'll strike back from the ground." Her workshop became a forge of defiance, and Dr. Lian, standing in blood-stained scrubs, met the exhausted eyes of her staff and told them, "We do not surrender to fear. We heal, we hold. Every life saved is victory." The Korath had expected prey to scatter. Instead, they had awakened a spirit that did not bow. And as the sun rose over a wounded earth, fire still smoldering on the horizon, the first sparks of defiance glowed in human hearts. The hunters had revealed themselves. But what they had yet to understand was that humanity, when cornered, did not cower. Humanity fought. The fury was stirring. The days after the first strike were a blur of smoke and fear. Cities trembled, governments struggled to respond, and people everywhere whispered the same question. What are they? For the Korath, it was routine. Their hunt always began this way, with fire, panic, and silence. But on Earth, something unusual was happening. Instead of surrender, voices of defiance began to echo through the ruins. Humans were rallying. Captain Elias Rowan became one of those voices. In the coastal city, the bunkers swelled with frightened families. Food ran short. Hope grew thinner with each distant thunder of alien fire. But Elias would not let despair win. Each night he walked among the survivors, speaking quietly, helping mend broken doors, organizing watch rotations. His presence reminded them of something easy to forget, that they were not alone. One evening he gathered a dozen young men and women. They looked at him with eyes full of uncertainty. He placed an old map of the city on the table and traced his finger across key points. "They are strong," Elias said. "Stronger than us, yes. But strength isn't everything. They think we're prey because we scatter. We don't scatter anymore. We fight smart. We fight together." Those who listened felt their fear turn into something harder, sharper. Not courage yet, but the shape of it. Far inland, Lian was turning her workshop into something more than a place of invention. Survivors trickled in, neighbors, friends, strangers with nothing left but the clothes on their backs. Instead of sending them away, Mara welcomed them. She gave them work. Some sorted tools, others carried scrap. And she, with feverish determination, welded and built. She was crafting weapons, crude but fierce. Spikes that could tear into metal hulls. Modified engines that could launch projectiles with terrifying force. Nothing compared to the alien technology, but better than empty hands. As sparks showered the dim room, she told those around her, "They expect us to cower. Let's give them a surprise." The people believed her, not because her machines were perfect, but because her spirit burned like a forge. And in the overwhelmed hospital, Dr. Lian Hart became more than a healer. She became a leader of endurance. Her staff, exhausted and frayed, looked to her for guidance. Supplies dwindled. Power flickered. The wounded kept coming. Still, she stood tall. One night, as air raid sirens wailed again, a nurse broke down in tears. "It's hopeless, Lian. We can't save them all." Lian knelt, took the nurse's trembling hands, and whispered, "Maybe not. But we save who we can. Every breath we give back is a victory they cannot take from us." Her words spread through the wards, strengthening weary arms. Hope did not return in a flood, but in small drops. Each life saved another reminder that humanity was still standing. Above, in orbit, the Korath commander studied these developments with growing curiosity. Unexpected behavior, he noted. Instead of collapse, resistance was forming. Prey was not only surviving, but adapting. He ordered more probes, more precision strikes. Yet something gnawed at him. These humans fought as though each defeat only sharpened their will. On the third night, the Korath struck the coastal city again. Beams tore across the harbor, igniting ships and warehouses. Elias led his small band of fighters through the smoke, not to flee, but to guide civilians to safety. And when one probe descended, its scanners sweeping, Elias hurled a makeshift explosive into its core. The machine staggered, sparked, and crashed into the sea. The roar of the explosion sent a shockwave of belief through the survivors. A machine had fallen. In Mara's workshop, the first of her weapons was tested. A crude launcher, built from scavenged pipes and aircraft parts, fired a metal rod into the night sky. It did not reach a ship, but it struck a hovering probe, piercing its hull. Sparks rained down, and the survivors around her cheered. Mara smiled for the first time in days, soot smudging her face. "See," she said. "They bleed too." And in the hospital, Lian saved a child pulled from rubble. When she handed the boy back to his mother, the woman whispered, "You've given me a reason to keep going." Lian, though exhausted, realized she was fighting in her own way, by refusing to let despair take root. The sparks of defiance were growing into flame. The Korath had seen prey scatter. But now, they saw prey fight back. And though the hunters still circled above, the prey was learning the taste of resistance. Soon they would learn something else, what it meant when humanity's fury was fully unleashed. The hunters pressed harder. Across Earth, the Korath unleashed wave after wave of strikes. Cities burned, highways turned into rivers of fleeing humanity. Skies that once held plains of commerce now roared with alien shadows. And yet, something unexpected happened. The more the Korath struck, the more humans adapted. In the coastal city, Captain Elias Rowan's ragged band had grown. What began as frightened civilians was now a militia. carrying scavenged weapons and the determination of those with nothing left to lose. They trained in alleyways and old shipyards, practicing ambushes, memorizing routes, preparing for the inevitable. One night, a Korath patrol ship descended low to scan the docks. Elias stood at the front of his fighters, waiting for the right moment. When the ship's beam swept across them, the militia ignited their trap. Explosives hidden in old fuel barrels erupted, engulfing the vessel in fire. It staggered, engines whining before crashing into the sea with a hiss of steam. The survivors roared, not in triumph alone, but in defiance. They had taken a predator from the sky. Elias looked at their faces smeared with smoke and sweat and said, "Remember this. They bleed, they fall. We are not prey. We are the storm they never expected." Far inland, Mara Lin's workshop had become a forge of resistance. The survivors she had gathered now called it the nest. Sparks flew day and night as crude launchers, spiked barricades, and improvised drones were built. Mara herself barely slept, her eyes blazing with obsession. When news of the dockside victory reached her, she hammered metal harder than ever before. "They can be beaten," she whispered. "So we'll build faster, stronger. If they strike us from the sky, we'll bring the sky down on them." One evening, a group of Elias's fighters arrived at her door, carrying broken weapons and desperate hope. For the first time, Elias and Mara stood face to face. He was weathered, steady. She was young, fire in human form, and in that meeting a bond was forged. Elias provided discipline. Mara provided ingenuity. Together they began to plan not just to defend but to strike back. Meanwhile, in the heart of the city's hospital, Dr. Lian Hart continued her quiet war. The flood of wounded grew with every attack, yet she refused to yield. She taught her staff to turn pain into purpose. Blood stained her hands daily, yet she never faltered. When Elias's fighters came in with burns and shattered bones, Lian met him for the first time. Their eyes held the same weariness, the same unspoken vow. "We keep them alive no matter what." She stitched wounds as Elias described the militia's efforts. She saved his men, and in return he promised her protection for the hospital. It was not a pact of convenience, it was unity born from fire. Above, the Korath commander grew impatient. "The prey resists beyond projections," he noted. He increased the scale of the hunt. Larger ships descended. Cities were surrounded. Communication lines severed. But with every strike, humans only hardened. Stories spread like wildfire. A village that fought off drones with farming tools. A pilot who rammed his failing jet into an alien cruiser. Children who carried water to hidden fighters through ruined streets. Humanity's fury was no longer isolated. It was spreading, a storm gathering from every corner of the world. One night, Elias, Mara, and Lian stood together for the first time in a bunker lit by lanterns. Around them, fighters, builders, and healers filled the room. Elias unrolled a map scarred with marks of battle. Mara placed one of her crude drones on the table. Lian set her hands on the shoulders of the weary, steadying them. Elias spoke. "They think us scattered. But together we are stronger than they know. We will strike where they don't expect. Bleed them until they fear to fly over us," Mara added. "Every bolt, every spark I forge will be our answer to their arrogance," and Lian said, softly but firmly, "We will not let fear define us. We will fight, heal, and endure. That is humanity's strength." In that bunker, something larger than resistance was born. It was unity. The storm had broken, and the hunters circling above did not yet realize that they were no longer the only predators on this battlefield. The night air smelled of fire and iron. Earth's skies had become a theater of shadows and light. Alien vessels hovered like predators, yet the humans below were no longer hiding. They were hunting. Captain Elias Rowan stood on the roof of a half-ruined skyscraper, scanning the horizon. Through the smoke, he saw Mara Lin's drones skimming the streets, carrying miniature explosives and reconnaissance tools. Every human movement below was calculated. Every strike measured. What had begun as desperate survival had transformed into a campaign of unyielding defiance. "They think they own the skies," Elias said to Mara, standing beside him. "Let's remind them we own the ground." Mara's eyes sparkled with determination. "And the sky," she added. lifting a hand to gesture at a dozen launchers she had positioned on nearby rooftops. "They'll learn the cost of underestimating us." Below, Dr. Lian worked tirelessly in a fortified hospital. Her patients, wounded soldiers, civilians, even children, were treated with the precision of a commander. But she was more than a healer now. She was a symbol. Her calm, unwavering resolve spread through the city like a virus stronger than fear. Every life she saved became another ember of humanity's fury. The Korath, confident in their superiority, launched their largest assault yet. Ships descended in a coordinated wave, beams cutting through buildings, tearing streets apart. In their calculations, they expected panic, disorder, surrender. What they received was something entirely different. Elias's militia moved like shadows through the chaos. Explosives detonated beneath alien landers, collapsing them into the streets. Mara's drones, small yet precise, ignited engines and disrupted targeting systems. Fighters with scavenged weapons rained fire on the Korath, striking with the ingenuity born of desperation and brilliance. The aliens had expected prey. They found hunters. Elias leaped from one rooftop to another, rallying his fighters mid-battle. His voice carried over the roar of collapsing buildings. "Push forward! They bleed! Every strike counts." Mara, moving through the streets with engineers, repaired broken launchers, redirected drones, and unleashed a flurry of deadly traps. Every device she built was a testament to human ingenuity. Crude, perhaps, but unpredictably effective. Meanwhile, Lian moved among the wounded, sometimes dragging them herself from danger zones, sometimes guiding others. "No one left behind!" she shouted, her voice clear over the chaos. Her determination inspired even those too young or too frightened to fight. They became part of the resistance. Above, the Korath commander observed with growing alarm. "These humans are adaptive, coordinated, resilient beyond projections." He had anticipated fear, confusion, panic, but not fury. They fought with logic, instinct, and something his scanners could not quantify: relentless spirit. As the night wore on, humanity's counterattack intensified. Old warships, retrofitted with improvised weapons, joined the fight. Civilians armed with whatever they could find: pipes, stones, modified engines, blocked landing zones, sabotaged equipment, and drove alien patrols back into the sky. Fires raged in both directions. Screams, roars, and the hissing of alien engines filled the air. Elias and Mara coordinated a decisive maneuver, a trap set across the central harbor. Buried explosives, hacked systems, and synchronized strikes created a perfect storm. The Korath fleet, caught in the ambush, faltered. Several ships were destroyed, their hulls torn apart by the very species they had considered prey. The commander's voice echoed in alien command. Unexpected, highly aggressive. Intelligence underestimated. Yet he persisted, unleashing more ships, more fire. But every attack met with clever defenses, guerrilla tactics, and relentless human ingenuity. Every fallen comrade, every burned building became fuel for the fight. Humanity's fury was unstoppable because it was personal. Each life mattered. Each loss sharpened resolve. By dawn, the first significant victory had been claimed. Ships lay smoldering in the ruins of the harbor. Streets, though battered, were under human control. Elias, Mara, and Lian stood together, watching smoke rise over the city. They were exhausted, bloodied, and weary, yet unbowed. Elias whispered almost to himself. They wanted prey. They found the storm. Mara's hands were blackened with soot and metal. She smiled faintly. "And it's just beginning." Lian touched the shoulder of a young fighter beside her. "We endure, we fight, and no one will ever underestimate us again." High above, the Korath observed. For the first time, they hesitated. The prey they had once thought weak, fragile, and compliant had become something far more terrifying. Relentless, adaptive, and united. Humanity was no longer merely surviving. Humanity was hunting back. And the fury they had unleashed would not stop until every shadow in the sky knew the price of underestimating mankind. The first light of dawn did not bring calm. It brought clarity. Captain Elias Rowan stood atop the ruined harbor, surveying the battlefield. Smoke curled from shattered ships. Fires burned in streets once filled with laughter. and the air vibrated with the echoes of human defiance. For days and nights they had fought, clawed, and improvised. And now, after suffering unimaginable loss, humanity stood victorious not because the enemy had stopped attacking, but because they had refused to yield. Mara Lin emerged from the shadows of her workshop. Her hands blackened, her clothes torn, but her eyes alight with fire. Around her, drones hovered silently, now reprogrammed to patrol the skies, serving as a warning and a promise. She approached Elias carrying one of her creations, a compact, jagged device designed to disable alien engines. "They'll never forget this day," she said, voice low but steady. "We've shown them that humanity does not bow." Elias nodded, placing a hand on her shoulder. "No," he said. "They saw prey, and met the relentless fury of mankind." In the fortified hospital, Dr. Lian moved among survivors, patching wounds and offering quiet encouragement. She had witnessed death on a scale she never imagined, yet her heart held a stubborn hope. Children laughed softly as their mothers clutched them, exhausted but alive. Soldiers whispered thanks as she tended to their injuries. Each life saved became proof that humanity could endure even when the odds seemed insurmountable. The Korath commander, watching from orbit, understood the truth too late. The calculations, the projections, the endless scans, all had failed to measure the human spirit. They had expected prey that scattered, cried, and surrendered. Instead, they encountered unity, ingenuity, and unbreakable resolve. His fleet was shattered, some ships drifting uselessly in the stratosphere, others burning in the oceans below. Yet even in defeat, he noted one inescapable fact: humanity would not stop. Their will was unpredictable, a force that could not be contained by technology or terror alone. And so he withdrew, leaving Earth battered but unbowed, a silent acknowledgement that the species he had once underestimated was something far greater than prey. Elias, Mara, and Lian gathered once more at the harbor. The city around them was scarred but alive. Survivors cleaned debris, rebuilt shelters, and tended to the wounded. From the ruins rose a quiet strength, the knowledge that humanity could face annihilation and still endure. Elias looked to Mara. "We built more than weapons. We built a future," he said. Mara smiled, her gaze drifting to the horizon. "And they'll remember it," she said. "Every corner of the galaxy that thought humans were weak, they'll remember." Lian placed her hands on the shoulders of two young children who had been watching the horizon. "And let this day remind you," she said softly, "that fear is temporary. Courage is eternal. Compassion is our armor, and unity is our strength." For the first time in days, silence stretched across the city. Not a silence of fear, but of reflection. Humanity had faced an enemy that seemed invincible, and in their darkest hour, they had discovered a truth that no scanner or weapon could ever measure. The heart of mankind beats with relentless fury. From the ocean to the mountains, from the skies to the streets, humans stood together. They mourned the lost, healed the wounded, and celebrated life with a fierceness no predator could extinguish. And as the sun rose higher, gilding the ruined city in gold, Elias Rowan whispered to no one in particular, yet to all who could hear, "We are more than flesh and bone. We are hope. We are courage. We are the relentless fury of mankind, and no shadow, no matter how dark, will ever make us prey again." Somewhere beyond the stars, the Korath retreated into the void, their arrogance shattered. But on Earth, humanity looked to the future not with fear, but with pride, unity, and determination. For they had seen the fire in the eyes of their hunters, and they had returned it tenfold. And that fire would never go out.